What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, the Puerto Rican Conservative, and I wanted to speak about a little history today, being that, as everybody knows, Red Pill Black, also known as Candace Owens, went on Fox News stating that the NRA was founded with the sole purpose of helping African Americans arm themselves and defend themselves from members of the Ku Klux Klan. So, as everybody knows, I think I've covered this before, but I'm going to cover it one more time. I'm a person who is all for and in favor of our Second Amendment rights to bear arms. I do not believe in any degree of moderation or restriction to the Second Amendment. So, the reason I'm stating this is because I don't want people to confuse me debunking a story that was circulated by Candace Owens and Fox News with whether or not I support the Second Amendment rights. So before I get started on this little brief history lesson, I just wanted to make clear that I do support and I'm all in favor of our Second Amendment right. But ultimately, Candace Owens lied on Fox News, and Fox News allowed Candace Owens to lie, and I'm going to explain to you why. According to Candace Owens, when she went to Fox News, she stated that the NRA had been started as a civil rights organization to help arm African Americans so that they may defend themselves from attacks being initiated or launched by members of the KKK. Now, as somebody that is, I'm a truth seeker, I'm a truth teller. Regardless of what party you think you represent or what ideologies you believe you're aligned with, whether you're right or whether you're left, if you're wrong, and I'm going to debunk you. And because of this, I'm going to take a little time out to explain to you a little history about the NRA and why Candace Owens lied, and why Fox News also allowed her to lie, and why people that support her ultimately want this lie to continue to be circulated. Now, for those of you who don't know, the NRA was founded in the 1870s by two guys, one of them called William Church, and the other one Mr. Wingate. I forgot his first name. Anyways, when they started the NRA, which was in the 1870s, the NRA was started with the sole purpose of enhancing the marksmanship of veterans and soldiers alike. And this is part of the NRA's history. This is not me just making it up. So where Candace Owens got this fabricated story about the NRA being started as a civil rights organization is beyond me. Secondly, let's look at some other facts in order for me to debunk the claim from Candace Owens and allowed by Fox News that the NRA was founded with the sole purpose of playing the part of a civil rights organization to help arm African Americans against the KKK. First of all, let's look at the fact that first of all, there is no such history or no such credible reference to corroborate this story. Secondly, is that the only credible association between the NRA and members and groups of the civil rights movement of African Americans, the only connection and the only history that I found was that in the 1960s, approximately in 1967, a law known as the Mulford Act, which was a gun control law, became the first law that the NRA actually endorsed. The Mulford law was basically drafted by the Democrats in order to take away the gun rights from people of the African American community by putting in, listen to the language. The language is that when the Mulford Act of 1967 came out, the NRA made a public announcement that they support this gun control law. So, and this was all, and it'll tell you, just look it up. Look up Mulford Act, and it will tell you that the law was specifically designed after the Black Panther Party rose to power, and only after the Black Panther Party showed that they were armed. Now, if you don't believe that they had a prior opportunity to support the public display of weapons that were, by the way, loaded, then we can always refer to the 1920s DNC rally known as the Klansbake, when more than 20,000 members of the Ku Klux Klan rallied in favor of the Democratic Party, and they were armed and loaded. So could it be a coincidence that 40 years later, the NRA decided that they were going to support the Mulford Act, which was drafted in order to strip the Black Panther Party and other paramilitary African-American groups of the right to bear and publicly display their arms? The NRA then supported it. This is the only proof of the NRA and their correlation or association to African-American history. So no, the NRA was not formed as a civil rights organization to help arm African Americans and help them defend themselves from the Ku Klux Klan. If anything, the NRA was the one that supported the idea of the 1967 Mulford Law Act, which basically took away the rights of displaying your weapon in public or having loaded weaponry. But if we want to know how, the truth about how African Americans became armed and how African Americans were able to have access to weapons, then the answer is simple. The answer is this: that in the 1860s, when people of African descent joined the civil war between the blue and the gray, African or people of African descent were offered the opportunity to fight for their freedoms, and in turn, by fighting for their freedoms, they fell under the freedoms and the rights of average Americans. And because of this, once the Civil War was ended, those that fought in the war were able to, from that point on, own the weapons that they utilized while they were at war. And because there were hundreds of thousands of people of African descent that went to war for their freedom, then because of that, hundreds of thousands of people of African descent were armed. And because of this, Ku Klux Klan can no longer target African Americans randomly, but instead there were a lot of African Americans that came either directly that served our armed forces or whose ancestors fought in our armed forces, who were armed, but it was only because of the inherited arsenal, the inherited weapons from their ancestors. And I decided that I wanted to debunk this story being pushed by Candace Owens and being allowed to be circulated by Fox News. Not because I'm against our Second Amendment right. Matter of fact, I'm one of the biggest proponents of our gun rights. I respect and I support our rights to bear arms 1000%. But ultimately, I warn Republicans and I warn conservatives all the time that as long as we continue to allow people to camouflage themselves behind the title of conservative or behind the title of Republican in order for them to push propaganda and make us as a collective look like liars and agendas, then we're part of the problem.